It is great to be back home. Being in Washington, D.C., by the way, I usually end my speeches until December 31st, and don't you forget, I'm from Washington, and I'm here to help you. But I no longer have to tell that story anymore. But Atlanta is a unique community. I don't know, I've been to most big communities in the country, and there are very few with the entrepreneurial spirit and sense of hospitality combined with generosity. And this is why big things have happened here over the years. And you saw pictures of people and the predecessors before them that made it happen. Atlanta usually takes a community-wide approach to things. There's not a better designated area agency on aging in the country that I've seen than the one here in Atlanta. A 100-plus-year-old tradition of excellent nursing home care. That you don't see that everywhere. You don't see the foundation type support and the generous individual donors. And every now and then you run into a couple like Margaret and Rhodes Purdue. I was in the panhandle of Texas, and there's the Bivens home. You never heard of it, but it's out there in the middle of nowhere. I told them I was going to buy them a tree because the only one they had blew over in a storm. But here's a picture of Mrs. Bivens over the original nursing home that's out of date but immaculately kept. And Bivens was oil and cows, and they have a tradition just like you do, David, of carrying on not only successful business interests but the philanthropy to go with it. In Cleveland, there's the McGregor home. Rockefeller owned the oil, and McGregor made the barrels. And Mrs. McGregor thought there should be a home for indigent women. And it's traditions like A.G. Rhodes and then Margaret and Rhodes, and now you got the whole family involved. I'm trying to figure out how that wound up in the gene pool somehow, and that's a remarkable family story that is emblematic of the spirit of Atlanta. So it is good to be home with you. Al is a dear colleague and friend, and David came up. David and Al did a workshop for us at one of our big meetings on transformational governance, because in the not-for-profit sector, if you don't have a strong board, it's just a matter of time before there's a problem. And I still only believe there's one bank, and that's trust company. I know that's wrong. Jenny Philippi is here. I know that's wrong. And there's only in D.C. the company is the CIA, and here the company is Coca-Cola. It's still Coca-Cola. I came from the area where it's Coca-Cola, and up there it's still pop or soda, and there's no such thing. So my mama called me one time after the scandal in Northeast Georgia about the crematory guy that didn't burn all the bodies. And so I was fairly new in Washington, all that was occurring, and she called me up and she said, "Oh, son, I'm so distressed." And I said, "Why, Mama?" She said, "Our crematory problem here in Georgia, I guess it's made the news up there." And I said, "Oh, yeah, it's all over the news, Mama." And she says, "Lord, how embarrassing." She said, "I hope that is not hurting you in your work." And I said, "No, Mama, I just tell people now I'm a Virginian." And just that quick, she says, "You better not forget where you came from." And we haven't gotten, I'll get off. I just loved walking in here. About every third person I got a story with, and David, I could be here all afternoon. Eventually would just be boring myself with them, but it is good to be back. The Living Well theme. I want to talk about living healthy aging and how to live successfully, but that is exactly the right theme that needs to be changed because as this aging society is structured in the way we deliver a lot of health and other kind of services, we're still living in a living sick model that's very expensive, and it has some implications on how all of us as we age perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. And so, not surprising, A.G. Rhodes is on the cusp of the theme that ought to be touted for the next couple of generations, and I commend you for that, and am honored that you would want me to speak to that issue here today. I've heard more than one economist say that if we don't figure this aging thing out, it is now emerging in some places is the number one stressor on national economies. And we spend more here and get less than we like than most any other country. The late Dr. Marvin Rast, a distinguished Methodist clergy of 2 generations ago, and a resident of Wesley Woods, gave a talk that he sent me a copy of. I had it in my file to a similar group to this, and he quoted a book called The View from 80 by a man named Malcolm Cowley. And the quote is this: "The last act has begun," viewing from 80, "and it will test the play." Humankind has struggled for now thousands of years on what successful aging is and what to do with our elders. Lots of studies about it over time, and in many ways, few societies have found healthy ways to recognize seniors and the role they can play, and what it means to be healthy even late in life when you have impairments and vulnerabilities. Will Rogers said the only way to really slow aging down is to make it have to go through Congress. And he's probably right about that. But we tend to stereotype seniors, don't we? And there's extremes. All older people are wise. Well, you've got 1 or 2 in your family right now that you know ain't wise, and you know that doesn't fit. And on the other hand, we have comedic caricatures of the Maudie Frickert and Tim Conway and others. So how do we begin to tell the authentic story of aging so that new role models emerge? Satchel Paige said, if you did not know how old you were, how old would you be? Which begins to get at what the aging well phenomena is. Erik Erikson, probably the most noted psychologist of the 20th century, detailed 8 phases of life. He said there are conflicts that every phase of life you have to work through. Infancy, it's trust versus mistrust. Babies grow up in trusting mom and dad and the environment, or they don't. A lot of our social ills are built on kids that don't have a great start and never learn to trust the community they live in. Late in life, the 2 conflicts are, at about my age, generativity versus stagnation. Older men have a high suicide rate, or did at one time, per capita of any group in our society. And part of that's because they retire, have nothing meaningful to do, spouse is gone, and they are vulnerable. Are you going to stagnate, or are you going to find new ways to fulfill your life? In the very last stage of life, the issue is ego integrity versus despair. And that's, you hear that all the time, and it's a fancy way of saying people have to work out in their lives, has my life been worth it or not? And everyone has to kind of answer that for themselves, and they get help with that from the cues around them. The gold standard of aging successfully came from Abraham and Sarah. You will recall the story, and I'll take liberties with the scripture. Some of you may have known them personally. I don't know. Some of you have been around a while. It's Abraham and Sarah. If you remember, God went to them and said, I have a big job I want you to do. Will you do it? And they said, what? And he said, I want you to be the mother and father of many nations. And Sarah laughed, and she said, we're too old for that. And God said, I didn't ask you how old you were. I asked you, would you do something really important? And of course, the rest is history. We'll come back to that theme in just a minute, but I think we all want to be able to finish our lives at the end and say, it was a good old age. And then organizations like this, it's our responsibility in society to say, how do we make that happen for as many people as possible? So yet we fight the process. I won't ask how many people did something to make yourself act younger before you came here today. We won't get into any kind of a support group about that, but no doubt Botox is rampant in here. And now they even have men's beard dyes for all this to make ourselves look younger, as if we can go back the way we came. So we can either finish our lives with a lot of regrets, or we can finish our lives and say it's been a good old age. Early in my career, I had the opportunity, I was asked in the theology school to bring a couple of old people up to one of my classes. And so I picked Mr. Hojas and Mr. Miller to go up there so theology students could, it's like kind of going to the zoo. We used to have a lady at Bud Terrace, when church groups would come through, she'd go sit out in front and have a sign that said, take a picture of an old person, 5 cents. And anyhow, I took Hojas and Miller, and one of the students right off the bat said, so what's it like to grow old? And Mr. Miller, who had a long career as a troubleshooter for a railroad, he could spot problems. He lived at Wesley Woods, and he spotted them every day and reminded me when I'd go through the dining room. But Miller said, well, I'll tell you. He said, life at my age is meaningless. I don't know why I've lived this long, except I don't have the guts to take my own life. And he kind of chuckled. So maybe if I die soon, they can just take me out and make dog food out of me. And there was kind of a nervous titter that went through the crowd, and Miller himself kind of chuckled. Thank you. I really appreciate this kind of service at my age. A couple hours Chardonnay will be fine. Mr. Hojas said, well, now, Miller, I see it differently. He said, I'm 92. I've lived from the horse and buggy to the space age. I've lived through world wars and minor skirmishes. I've lost kids and even a grandchild. And he said, I try to go to bed at night and make sure I'm not out of sorts with anybody I care about. And then if I don't wake up the next morning, that's just another mystery I will have lived through, like I lived through these other things I didn't understand. Two very different philosophies and perspectives. So I'm guessing that we'd all like to think that we could have Mr. Hojas's attitude. So now I want to tell you the secrets of getting there that I've learned over the years, so maybe you can apply this in your own life. The first secret is choose your parents and your grandparents wisely. Genetics, there's some things that are just baked in. We can't do much about it. Maybe we can change it along the way. But so you look at your hand you're dealt and you deal with it. Lifestyle is the second one. I don't have to tell you, it's on the TV all the time, and it's in articles, diet, exercise. You don't hear as much about prayer and meditation and doing new things in the community and focusing on your strengths instead of your weaknesses. But lifestyle, very, very important. Successful living. I remember going through an airport, I think it was San Antonio years ago, crowded what do you call it? Anyhow, heading down toward the gates. And the crowd was parting. And so much so that I thought, well, maybe there's some kind of a dignitary or something coming through. Nope. It was a little old man. He was every bit of 85. He had gray hair and a flat top haircut, leathery, wiry skin. He had on some anatomically correct exercise pants, white shoes with black socks. I don't care how old you are, fellas, wherever it says in GQ or Joseph A. Banks or whatever, white shoes and black socks, ditch that. Anyhow, he's marching down the tarmac and people are just getting out of his way. And he had on a sweatshirt that said, "The smoldering embers of a fiery youth." Now, your successful living is how do you discover or keep moving, keep stoking the smoldering embers of a fiery youth. What you don't want to become is a collection of your own diseases. As we grow old, our kids need to know if we have health problems, because the last thing you want to hear after an event is, "Well, I didn't want to bother you with it." And we've all been there. But I was on a cruise, my wife and I, with some friends a couple of years ago, and there was a big family gathering on the ship we were on. It looked like maybe 20, 25, at least three generations. And they were all getting up for the, for the tours of the day kind of thing. And there was one young man about your age that was stuck with great-grandmother. She had to be close to 100. And I heard the conversations. I'm finishing my poached eggs. "Well, honey, my festering sore nearly isn't as bad today as it was yesterday." I thought, oh, dear God, spare us all. And I looked at that young man, and I said, he's either been designated short straw for the day, or that poor rascal we're doing everything he can to get in the wheel. But what we don't want to become is our diseases. And too often, because we are sick society when it comes to aging instead of a well society, people don't want to hear that. As one old friend of mine said, his wife was dying of cancer. He said, "I had to get out of the house because friends keep coming by with their organ recitals. How bad their stomach is, how bad their kidneys are, how bad their bladder is, and I'm tired of hearing all that." And you know what? Most people are. Successful living, keep it positive. The late Candler Budd, I went to see him over his last days at Wesley Woods. He'd had a stroke. And of course, you want to ask the question, "Well, Candler, are you eating enough? Are you able to move that hand better today?" He wouldn't answer any questions like that. He'd say, "Fine, tell me about your boys. Tell me about that beautiful bride of yours." He wasn't going to be a disease. Fourth thing is, the late Roy McTeer, Pete McTeer's daddy. We had the pleasure of serving him. Kirk, I got a picture of Kirk and Roy McTeer in the garden over at Wesley Woods. And I go in to see Roy, and I thought he was in pain because he was sort of sounding like that. And I said, "Roy, what are you doing? Are you all right?" He said, "I'm praising God. I'm praising God. It's one of the things I can still do." Think about that. Think about that. Staying in charge and being in charge of who's in charge when you can't be in charge. An old man told me one time his family had taken away everything. He said he was acting out. We had a guy that left Bud Terrace, kept escaping, and because family wouldn't let him keep his pickup truck. Of course, they were afraid he'd drive it off, and so he escaped one night, and we had to call the family. Said he ain't come back yet, and he showed up about dinner time in a brand new Ford pickup truck. He made his point, but this guy said, "Don't you ever forget, young feller, the automobile, the car keys, a checkbook, and a place to call home are what every man wants to hold on to." Presumably the same thing for women. So stay in charge, but be clear about who makes the decision when you can't be. And that's gets into the next secret is good planning, not just financial. People that plan well financially do better than people that don't. And we got a generation of women that come along that are going to be hit with, on average, about $130,000 out-of-pocket expense for care at home that they don't know they have. So we got to find a different way to finance aging services in this country, and we've been committed to that. But good planning. But who makes decisions on your life? You need to have that family powwow. It needs to be codified. Your doctor, your lawyer, your friends need to know what will happen. Otherwise, people will do things to you out of liability concerns and other things that you may not want done for yourself. And we know that majority of health care is spent in the last 6 months of life, and a lot of it doesn't do much good. but we still spend the money. Good. You got to have the game plan, the end game, and comes a time when prolonging life just to forestall the inevitable just doesn't help anybody. And more often than not, from my experience, it creates family regrets that are visited on 1 or 2 or 3 generations because people don't know what you want to do with your life. Which gets me to the 6th secret, and that's family communications and extended family and friends. Don't make promises you can't keep. You got to promise me you'll never put me in A.G. Rhodes or Wesley Woods until the day you can't be living at home responsibly anymore. And then who are you going to call? You're going to call A.G. Rhodes. Because you want the best of a place that nobody wants to be. When they get in there and they find out life is better than they thought it was going to be because of this image we have about nursing homes, then families feel better and there are fewer regrets. I'll never forget the family where the woman on her husband on his deathbed said to his wife, and you got to make me a promise after I'm gone, you'll never let another man put his hands on you. Think about how that ties people up in the rest of their lives and limits their opportunities. I remember I got a desperate call from a clergy one day when I talked with a woman in his church, and I happened to know her, and her situation was this. She says, my Uncle Gene is just coming out of a hospital. He's had surgery. He wants to go home. We can't keep anybody with him, and I'm holding the bag. My mother did this, but she's impaired now and has dementia. So I said, how many people in your family? Well, there are at least 3 of them that she was the it person for. So she's calling me, and I said, well, we can help you get some people. We'll work through this. Tell me more about him. He said, well, he was a construction foreman for years. He was difficult to deal with, an irascible, crusty old guy, and he didn't get along with much of any of us. And she said, I visited his home. I've been trying to find people. I can't keep people more than a shift or 2. And we thought we had just the right person. And I went over there this morning, and she was heading up the driveway leaving. And I said, what's wrong? She says, I can't handle this anymore. She said, you go in there and look at him. So I go back in the house with her, and there's Uncle Gene in the den watching television in bra and panties and slip and slippers and a nice... she was stunned. She called her mother. Mother said, well, Uncle Gene's been like that a long time. We just didn't want to bother you with it. And she's crying, and I said, well, okay. I said, I 3 things to remember. Let's move forward. Number 1, his condition is not contagious. Number 2, he won't go walking around the neighborhood trying to convert other people to it. And number 3, you got a whole new range of possibilities for Christmas presents. Well, she started laughing, and I said, if I were a betting man, I'm no doctor. I bet he's an untreated manic depressive or bipolar, and sure enough, that's what he was. Never had really good treatment and behind a lot of his behavior, and we got him the right psychiatric help, and he eventually moved into a place we recommended for him. But the family didn't communicate, and here's this woman. I bet if we had a show of hands, there are 30 of you in this room right now that are in a similar kind of situation as the it person. Family communications. And also, that gets us into meaningful relationships. I'll never forget the woman at our nursing home one time that said, nobody ever touches me anymore. Oh, yeah, they change my diapers and they feed me and they dress my wounds, but nobody, and she says, I miss that. We opened Brandon Lodge up in Blairsville in the first year in the mountain air up there. We had 13 weddings, including 2 elopements. I had families calling me saying, why are you letting my mother run off with the old man down the hall like we could do something about that? But we all have the need for important and intimate relationships. And how that gets facilitated even among people with dementia. There's some now good material on people with dementia don't leave their intimate feelings at the doorstep when they come in. And you can't put them on enough drugs to make that go away. So how do we continue to facilitate meaningful relationships with other people? I'll never forget a woman at Wesley Woods early in my career. She was 80-something, and I was in a newcomers group that happened to be all women. They were all new to the towers, and I was late to the meeting one day, and they were, when I came in, they were making suggestive remarks. Your harem is assembled, and you've kept us waiting, and this and that and the other. And okay, I'm a married guy, and so I said, wow. I said, I hadn't been hit on like this in a long time. I can't wait to tell my wife that there are people that still think I'm a pretty good catch. And they laughed, and this woman said, honey, this ain't mine. She said, this ain't mine. These ain't mine. But from here down, it's still all me. Okay. The eighth secret is laughing and crying. If I ever write a book, it's going to be whether to laugh or to cry. We know that laughter is cleansing. A good belly laugh is like a good cry. This makes you feel good all over. We have to find the humor in it. Bevel Jones, Bishop Bevel Jones, his wife Tuck recently died. They went through a lot of health problems, and Bev told me the story. He was helping Tuck one day after coming back from the hospital to get on the commode, and he's inching her there, making sure she's not falling, and he reaches up to help her pull down her undergarments, and he looked up at her, and he said, honey, I remember this being more romantic than this, don't you? Well, it broke the spell, and if you know Bev Jones, Bev could find the humor, the redemptive humor in a lot of things. So laughing and crying, you got to find it. The ninth secret is people that maintain their faith and some kind of regular church or synagogue attendance or whatever do better than people that don't. Jim Fowler, the late Jim Fowler, head of the Ethics Center at Emory, mother lived at Bud Terrace for years. She had early onset Alzheimer's, rare at the time. And we have a mutual friend at Emory whose mother just moved in, and the guy was about to explode because nothing was right. I mean, you see it at Rhodes. It couldn't do anything right. The food wasn't right. The lampshade wasn't right, whatever. And the guy was just had health problems of his own. I got Jim together with this guy, and he listened to him rant a little bit, and he said, you're going to have to find a way to laugh about this some. The guy said, what do you mean? He said, well, I was where you were. And he said, last Thanksgiving, we picked my mother up. I picked her up to take her to Thanksgiving. She didn't know who I was. Might have known my daughters, but we're not sure. And we sit down at the Thanksgiving table. We all held hands, and I was about to say grace. And my mother was a Quaker, little woman, a Quaker. And she begins, just out of nowhere, with this old Quaker blessing that she got word for word just right. And he said, we're all looking at each other, and so she got through, she ate her, thanked us all, we took her back home. He said, I thought, well, now she remembers something about her faith, just when we had thought she had forgotten everything. So I took her to the organ recital Christmas concert at Candler with the big organ. I'm thinking, this will stimulate some memories. And they did Bach's The Procession of the Magi. It's heavy music, he said, and then one of the faculty members comes in costume of the Magi and reads from Luke, behold, it is the star in the east, and then the second one comes in and picks up where Luke left off, and then the third one comes in, and rather than making a declarative statement, says, is this the Christ child we've all awaited? Whereupon my mother announced to everybody assembled, why, of course it is. Any dumb son of a bitch knows that. Laughing, crying, faith, hope, and I firmly believe that faith and religious training are the last to go. And finally, learning to say goodbye. making sure the last thing you said as an older person to your family is, "I love you," not "what you haven't done for me lately." Or the daughter who remembers saying, "Well, I told mother I loved her when we left and thanked her for all the things she'd done for me," because you can't get that moment back. When we put somebody in the ground, as one daughter said to me, "I've had a difficult time with my mother, but when I put her in the ground, I want to be able to look myself in the mirror that morning and say, I've done the best I know how to do as a daughter, and I have no regrets." Remorse is simple and sweet. It's missing somebody. Regrets visit people for a lifetime. So learn to say goodbye and do it with dignity, and forgive wherever possible. You got to get over the stuff in the past, because, again, the grands pick it up and it stays for generation. So those are the secrets of successful aging, and I would say we don't have to look any further in the modern day era than the people you saw in the video here earlier today. They died a good old age with family and friends and their achievements all around them, and we're here celebrating that today, and that celebration will perpetuate another 100 years of A.G. Rhodes' success, and you'll look back on it not only because you did great things for vulnerable people in nursing homes, but you changed a community and a society into a place that ages well instead of sick. God bless you. Keep up your great work. And again, I'm honored that you would want me to do this today. Take care. Anything I can do for you. If you get old, call me.